Great. Welcome everyone to today's live stream. I'm Conrad Mazeika, former financial planner, now a realtor here in Orange County, California. And today we're talking about something that stops a lot of people from investing in real estate. They think they need 20% down to buy an investment property. And the truth is, it's not always the case. Today we're going to break down strategies that investors are using right now to get started with far less money out of pocket. And joined today with me is my co-host Krystle Rains and our lending expert Sabina Adamski, who help clients structure loans for both homeowners and investors. Sabina is going to explain loans that allow low down payments, how people are using owner-occupied loans to start investing, financing options such as renovation loans and multifamily properties, and strategies investors use to build wealth with real estate. So before we begin, if you're thinking about buying your first investment property, type invest into the comments so we know who's watching. So let's get into it. All right, ladies. All right. All right.
Hey, guys.
What's up?
All right. So, Sabina, why do you think people think that they need 20% down?
I have no idea. I thought that was such an antiquated belief. Literally, one of my best friends was over. I lived with this girl for like 5 years too. And she was over on Sunday and we were just like talking about home buying and, and she's like she said something silly like, wait, you can buy a home with less than 20% down? Like, I thought you needed 20% down. And she's like, that's, or is that just like first time home buyers or something? And I was like, no, literally anyone can buy a home with less than 20% down. And I was just like, don't you watch my videos? Like, you follow my Instagram account. And I'm like, I sometimes feel like I post a video like that maybe once a year. And I'm like, do I post that too often? But apparently I don't post it often enough. But I was like, no, you don't need 20% down. So even if you've lived with a lender, you might even still have that belief. So it seems like it's not as antiquated as I thought, but I think it originated like years and years ago when you did actually need 20% to purchase a home. But then they introduced mortgage insurance, private mortgage insurance into the mix. And even though it says private mortgage insurance, it's not in the sense that you have to shop for it. The lender sets you up with the PMI. And then, it's not even like astronomical anymore. If you've got good credit, the PMI is really not much. So, I don't know why people think that, but it's something that we should be letting more people know about.
Absolutely. So let me see here. Just kind of get into my notes and questions on here.
I'm kind of curious. Tell me a little bit about other loan options and like other percentages that you see that aren't 20%, but that are like super common.
Well, we could start with the VA loan with 0% down. So veterans can buy a home with 0% down. And that's probably my favorite just because there's so many different loan options for veterans. And the VA makes it really possible for veterans to get in. It's like the least we could do to thank them for the service of, fighting for the country. And then there are physician loans. So a lot of physicians, doctors, dentists, veterinarians, they can purchase a home with 0 down for the most part. With veterans and VA loans, there's really no limit on the purchase price. It's really just going to be dependent on what you can qualify for. With physicians, you can typically buy up to 1.5 million with zero down. And it just varies depending on the product. The product I have in-house is up to 2.5 million with zero down. After that, you need at least 5% down. And then if you're not a physician or a veteran, and you're just a regular person like you or I, you can purchase a home with 3% down via Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and that's still a conventional loan. You have to be a first-time home buyer to take advantage of the 3% down option conventionally. After that, you have FHA loan options, which allow you to purchase with as little as 3.5% down. And with the FHA loan, you can actually purchase up to 4 units. You could buy a fourplex with 3.5% down,
Wow.
which is wild. And that's one good way to just jump into being an investor right then and there, is buying a 3 or 4 unit and renting out the other units while you live in one of them. And then after that, back to the conventional route, you can purchase with as little as 5% down if you're not a first-time home buyer. But you don't need to be a first-time home buyer to purchase using an FHA loan too, if you're doing 3.5% down.
Excellent. Well, those are much better numbers than 20%, right?
For sure. For sure. In fact, a lot of people will spend years trying to save 20% of, let's just for easy numbers in Southern California, 20% of $1 million is $200,000. It takes a long time to save $200,000 versus buying when you have like $50,000 or $100,000, and not just getting priced out of the market. Because if you have to wait 5 years to purchase a home, that $1 million home might then be like 1.2, 1.3, right?
Well, and here's the thing too, like, so at that $1 million house that you're like having an eye on, market goes up 5%, means you got to bring another $50,000 to the table somehow. So whether it's through the loan or through finance, through the loan or through down payment. So it's like you're kind of chasing these numbers when you're trying to go with the 20% down.
Yeah, you're just spinning your wheels in that case. So I can't tell you how many times I'll meet somebody getting pre-approved and they have a plan to save the 20%, and then they're just saving for years. And then they decide that they're going to buy with the 10% down instead, because they didn't realize their PMI wasn't going to be that high anyway, because they've got 760 FICO score, and they're like, oh, it's only $110 a month. They're like, why did I think it was more? And I'm like, I don't know. But yeah, so I see that a lot. People end up changing their tune when they realize how long it's going to take them to save, and as they keep watching the home prices go up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I actually, you know what? I'm just going to jump in. There's a good chat question right here, and I think you can answer this question, Sabina. So where's the best place to start when it comes to the home buying process?
Well, you guys might disagree with me as real estate agents, but I always think you should start by talking to a lender.
We don't disagree there.
We don't disagree.
As real estate, it's it's not as glamorous as real estate, but it is nice to know the numbers. Not to say that it's wrong to go to an open house randomly, fall in love with the home, and then talk to a lender, right? It's going to feel a little bit more chaotic and overwhelming, I'm sure, versus planning it out and knowing what to expect payment wise. And it's okay if things change. It's just kind of knowing where to start is talking to a lender and just having that upfront conversation. It could be as casual as you want, or it could be as formal as you want. But I always think, talk to a lender. Let's talk about your goals and what steps you should take to get there. And, that getting pre-approved. And you don't have to do necessarily a hard credit inquiry to get pre-approved anymore. You can just do a soft credit check, especially if you're like, well, I don't want to, buy right now, maybe in a year or two. I just kind of want to see what numbers to expect, what plan I should put in place. Then we can absolutely do that.
Absolutely. Good question on there. We don't usually answer questions at the end, but just want to kind of go through this process. Okay. So, all right. So what is the minimum down payment to put down on a 2 to 4 unit property?
If you purchase using an FHA loan, 3.5% down, which is awesome. And then if you're using a conventional loan, if we're doing Fannie Mae, we can do as little as 5% down. The numbers aren't going to be as pretty as an FHA loan, though, if you're only doing 5% down, just because the mortgage insurance is going to be a little bit different if we're going the conventional route. But 3.5 to 5% down if you're planning on living in one of the units.
Mm-hmm. Is it the same thing for VA and the doctor's loans?
A VA you could do as little as zero down. For the doctor's loans, we're limited to the 1 unit there.
Got it. Okay. That's good. All right. Okay. Answer that question. Okay. Low down payment. Okay. So another thing that loan that we've kind of talked about, it depends on what you think about it, how to structure this, but I kind of think of in the same class as far as investment loans is renovation loans. So talk about that.
Sure. Well, oftentimes there are older homes for sale and people like the cookie cutter stuff. They like the stuff that's move-in ready. And so sometimes it's like, yeah, that's great, right? But chances are if you like it, everybody else is going to like it too. And it's going to go quickly, right? So sometimes we introduce the idea of a renovation loan to some of our clients where, why don't you purchase with the intent to renovate the property? And maybe it doesn't need a lot. That would be ideal, right? If it doesn't need too much work, maybe it's just a little bit cosmetic, where you're buying a little bit of an older home and it's going to need a few upgrades. What I love about renovation loans is that your down payment is based on the purchase price plus the cost of the renovation. It's a little bit more of an intensive loan type, right? Because you're going to have to get the contractor ahead of time. You're going to have to get the bids, and all of that needs to be approved by the underwriter ahead of time. So it's a little bit more intense, and just depending on what your goals are for the project and whether you want multiple contractors or you want just the one GC to handle it, it's really just going to depend on your goals. But that opens the door to the possibilities for you to get that dream home look that you want without necessarily having to overbid on those properties that fly off the shelves just because they're perfect, they're move-in ready. Somebody already did the renovations for you and you have no decisions to make. So neither is right or wrong. I think with the, some of the renovation loans though, sometimes people run into problems with, competing with cash investors because boy, especially in Southern California, they love a fix and flip where, that's something that they regularly do. And they're not going to need necessarily a longer escrow period to get all the bids and get it approved by the underwriter in advance. So pros and cons to each, but it definitely opens the door for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that as far as the investors, because I see as a great strategy because investors want to buy like at this level, which is just really super low. And oftentimes they want to buy an off market because there's no competition. Nobody knows about it. It's kind of silent. And so people who are sellers don't realize that there's a lot more value to it. And then the traditional, retail people that want to make it their personal home buy it here and with it fully upgraded. So, something that's kind of in between that has not a lot to work with is a potential deal for people to get. And what I see is that, buyers that I have that are searching for something like this, they usually, if they lose in a bidding war, it's usually against a contractor who wants to live in the property, live in the neighborhood. And that's super attractive in some case. So a lot of times they would outbid, regular investors. Now, investors, they have a number of what they think is the purchase price, which is 70 to 80% of after rehab value in there and repair costs, etc. And so knowing those numbers with a renovation loan, you could definitely beat some of these investors. But most of the time, it's a contractor if it is a one by an investor, all cash, it's somebody who's like, I'm going to live in it for a year or two, kind of slowly, do the work and not, want to use it to, flip right away necessarily. So
I think there's sometimes when I have a buyer who's open to that idea, right? If they're like looking for something that needs a little bit of work, sometimes we have plan A and we have plan B, right? Depending on how much work is needed. And if they have enough funds available to like maybe do minimum down and then handle the repairs after they purchase without necessarily doing a renovation loan. I like them having plan A and plan B in case there is another offer on the table. And then, the seller, in case the seller doesn't want to deal with a longer escrow period and making sure those bids get approved. That's why I'm always like, all right, let's have plan A and plan B, just depending on what's possible for you. That way, you don't lose the home just in case somebody comes in with just a more appealing offer to the seller.
Absolutely. And time frames for renovation loans, escrow periods, how much should a buyer, give as far as an escrow period?
Just depending on how quickly they want to close and how stressed they want to be. I'd say most comfortable level is probably like a 45-day escrow to 60-day escrow. While you can do it in 30 days, you're going to be stressed. And that's okay. That's okay. If you can handle it. It's just, I like to preface with that because for me, I'm always like, I want my clients to have the most smooth experience, the most seamless experience. And it's not always that way. And, sometimes we have to get really competitive with even shorter timelines on other types of loans. And, it's not fun. It's not comfortable, but usually when you're in escrow, you have that like little bit of stress anyway, because you just want to get it done and you want the approval. And so like you're on board with the stress because you just want that approval sooner rather than later anyway.
Right. Absolutely. But in the end though, you get in with that renovation loan. Now you have more of an equity than as if you buy at the top of the market and we have a, downturn of some kind. So it's a great strategy. I would say long-term benefits.
We have some good loans too for, maybe even somebody who's not a first-time home buyer and maybe somebody who's trying to dip their toes with the, a fix and flip. Maybe they want to get in and they see a good opportunity. We have some good fix and flip loans as well for investors. And same thing, you can get in, you can just put those you need a little bit more money down on, usually at least 20-25% down, but it's 25% down on the purchase price. And then you can actually finance those renovations too if you get those plans and bids ahead of time. So that's a cool new program that we've been pushing a lot. And people seem to like it, especially, I have my license in Arizona too. People are finding those opportunities in Arizona and out here as well.
Awesome. Okay. So Sabina, when someone wants to buy their first investment property, what are some mistakes you see buyers make when getting financing?
First investment property where they're not living in it? I'd say not necessarily making mistakes that like can blow the loan up. I think the biggest surprise first-time investors see is how they didn't factor everything into the payment and breaking even and what their options were, and just seeing how much rent they can actually receive. I think they're usually shocked when they're like adding in the property taxes and homeowners insurance and just everything all in and realizing that maybe they're not necessarily breaking even. But that's something that I usually, at least with my clients, I try to coach them ahead of time, like send me your property address. Let me know what the market rents are. Let's see how we make this work, whether you add a little bit more money down, whether we turn it into a 40-year fixed instead of a 30-year fixed. But I think my investors love the interest only loan the most. And that's mainly because you have a much lower payment. It's interest only. You're not paying down that principal. And it really does help you save, depending on the loan amount, several $100s each month. And then that is making it easier to cash flow as rents typically go up each year, property home appreciation each year as well. Eventually it catches up where you are going to be able to cash flow when you refinance into a normal loan type as well. But typically investors like that cash flow. Cash flow is queen or king, whichever way you look at it. And so that's most common with investors.
Awesome. Okay. So when qualifying for like a mortgage on a multifamily, how does the rents in that current, let's say a 4-unit property, how does it qualify for the loan? What are the formulas?
Great question. So if you're living in one of them, we would take 75% of the 3 other units rent and use that. And the reason that for underwriting purposes, 75% of the market or lease rents is used is just to account for in case there's turnover, in case you can't rent it out. So that's why that rule of thumb is always 75%. Once you have a history of renting out the property and it's on your tax returns and you have a full year on your tax returns, we don't necessarily need to use 75% of the rental income anymore. We typically use what's reporting on your tax returns minus expenses, and then we add some of those expenses back, and then we can use 100% of whatever the value is after the expenses.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, because I guess technically you can start with one and then go to another one and so on and so forth. So 75, I mean, if you move into a second property, within, FHA, guidelines or Fannie Mae, guidelines, all the lender guidelines. How would that, how do you evaluate that from the next, one?
So typically if you're, planning on living in one of the units and you're using it as a primary residence to ensure that you can use a lower down payment and, just kind of getting in there. Typically you get a better rate when it's a primary residence. So a lot of people call it house hacking, right? So you're kind of getting in there. You plan to live there for at least a year, and you should live there for at least a year or a couple of years, you just depending on what you're looking to do. But typically when you end up moving on to your next home, whether you want to buy another, multi-unit or not, that's a good way to start building up the portfolio. Now, if you used an FHA loan to purchase your first, 3 or 4 flat, when you're moving on to the next one, you can't necessarily use another FHA loan because you can't have 2 FHA loans if you're moving within I think it was like 100-mile radius or so. So that's the one caveat. You'd probably have to use a conventional loan or refinance the other one out of the FHA.
Yeah, I know, Krystle, you have some clients that, built up quite a nice portfolio. So, what are your, what tell me about some of your client past experiences.
I think that one of my investors has always been really savvy since we were really young. I think that he started just after high school, bought his first single family, and he lived in that for quite some time, but really paid it down. And we decided that we were going to come up with a structure of adding, the goal was like a door a year or a door every 2 years, right? Because every 2 years you can switch your primary. He's accumulated a few properties now. He's really interested in a new development that's happening soon up in Oceanside that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Ocean Camp. It's going to be a resort with commercial and residential property within it for sale. But again, they haven't developed it yet, so that's still a little ways out. But I think that that's one of the next things that he's looking at, as well as multifamily. When you have invested in single family several times or multiple times, I think that you understand the scale between single family, multifamily, and then considering commercial. So that's our next goal. We've been looking at multifamily lately, and it's just a matter of how he wants to do that financing. Just got him in touch yesterday with a VA lender. He's never used a VA loan, but has got family members that are ready to make this move with him. So really exciting. I think that one of the key parts to investing isn't just timing what you can appropriately, but really, like Sabina said, mapping those numbers. Because at the end of the day, investing equates to someone who is looking for a return on investment, right? So if you don't have great formulas and you're miscalculating things or missing something, that's always kind of an issue, But thank heaven, like I said, he's super savvy, knows what he's doing. He's always mindful, talks with his tax professionals frequently, and he's done a great job. So just going to keep crushing, and that's just one of several. I think that if you take the time to map it out over the course of a few years, instead of saying, oh, this is your next one, and kind of like leaving the conversation there, strategize for longer. The long-term game always wins. And I think that he's going to be able to retire early thanks to real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. So people that are watching right now or live or the replay, if you can invest in real estate right now, what would you buy? A duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, single family rental, or a fixer upper? Just type it in the comments.
A quick question for you, a little off topic, but since you have a little bit of, quite a bit of financial planning background, my daughter's actually watching this live, and it just so happens that she went to the casino for the first time with her boyfriend and happened to win a substantial amount of money. She wants your guidance on how you would go investing approximately, we'll say $5K.
Well, that's kind of tough, because, if you're employed and you're living by yourself, you have your living expenses. So you want to put, up to 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved away. And, whether it's a CD or savings account, kind of want to put it away. Ideally, CDs could be good, as far as that's concerned, because it locks it up for a month or 3 months or 6 months, whatever the case may be, at an interest rate. You can kind of start from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that $5,000, while it's a significant amount of money, if that's like the general number we're playing with, it feels like it's kind of challenging to get started in real estate investing with that, right? And so,
not necessarily, but not, you're not going to purchase the property. So, there are some real estate investment options out there. Actually, from a investing to save strategy, would be put a portion of it, it's 1,000 or 2, whatever you kind of dictate it up, sit down with a financial planner and just kind of go over the strategy of, savings and your needs, etc. But if you're separating that money just for real estate, going to buy in the house, hedge it to real estate in some of these real estate stocks, real estate, art REITs, on there, because that's going to tie to the, real estate market, whether it's up or down.
Two is like with REITs and stuff. I don't think that a lot of people know what they are, and it's a very, very powerful way of investing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a collection of different, it's just, think of, like, let's just say $1 billion in one pile of money, purchasing different real estate sites, et cetera, throughout the country. Could be medical, could be strip malls, could be office buildings, could be apartments. Whatever the REIT has inside it will disclose what's inside of it at the time. Yeah. And so, with a small amount, you're just like taking a share of that, proceeds to whatever is the collection of inside that stock, or investment trust, or there's lots of different investments on there. So, if it just depends where you're at with things, because start with saving for your expenses. Mm-hmm. If you are self-employed, I would say, you want to save enough for 2 years because, being self-employed, you could not make money for 2 straight years. If you're like a business owner just starting up, you could, if you're just starting out, even in real estate, there's a lot of risks associated with that. But if you're working, 3 to 6 months is usually a good range of 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So you got to look at your budget, what you're spending on. That's your emergency savings fund. So if you get yeah, if you get unemployed, you have your unemployment insurance, but at least you have money to kind of keep yourself going for a period of time before you get a job. So lock that in first, and then you kind of have to strategize on there. And ideally,
I think that she'll be really intelligent at what she does, and I think that it won't be long until you see my daughter jumping into the real estate game.
Good.
Ready for it, and I think that it's awesome the way that she thinks and how mindful she is, and wants to save and wants to manage it appropriately, and so on her.
Absolutely. Okay, let me see.
What other questions do you have in the chat box?
Well, one thing that I wanted to kind of mention, and this will probably be clipped out in our shorts that are being displayed, is whenever you're looking at investments, like when you start with Sabina, you start with that kickoff on there with multifamily or renovation or whatever you're trying to accomplish. One concept that you have to understand is called return on equity. And so what that means is this. Let's just say you're $100,000 into a $500,000 property. So you brought $100,000 cash to purchase a $500,000 property. And then let's just say profit is $3,000 a month. I'm just running numbers here, so I know this may or may not be realistic. So you want to evaluate return on equity. So that $100,000 with that $3,000 a month of profit, your return on equity is $36,000, so 36%. And so let's just say the property doubles and the rent doubles. So went from $3,000 a month to $6,000 a month, and the actual property value went from $500,000 to $1 million. So obviously the equity is moved tremendously. So let's just say there's $300,000 balance on the loan, or let's just keep it simple. $600,000, and you're getting $6,000 a month. So that's a 10%. So your return on equity had dropped down in that period of time. And so you have to evaluate your return on equity when you're into the real estate investing strategies all the time. So, sit down with Krystle and myself so we can tell you what the return on equity is. And I guarantee you it's always going to start to drip down a little bit. So what do you do at that point? Sell it, 1031, exchange it into another property, maybe refinance it, cash out, sit down with Sabina, cash out, refi, and buy another property and kind of start the process again. So it's important to evaluate the return on equity, because as time progresses, you never want to have a paid off property that's a real estate investment. First, for a primary residence, sure, that's fine. That's comfortable. You're living there, etc. I get that part. But for an investment strategy, it's not very good to have a paid off, office building, 4-unit, apartments, wherever you're at that point. So, okay.
No.
All right. Let's
get write-off too.
Oh yeah, total write-off. You could. We're not we're not tax people. We're not attorneys. This is your PSA that to speak to your proper people. So don't sue me, bro. But the tax implications of using mortgages to reduce your taxes and depreciation, talk to your CPAs, because you can definitely have like almost tax-free income in a way. I'm not saying it, but you talk to your person, and they'll see run you through what you can do. Let me see here. Okay. Yeah, we covered that. All right. Yeah, so let's get into questions on here. So everybody can drop in your loan or offer questions right here in the comments. We're going to answer that right now. And if you're watching on the replay, I'll try to answer the best I can on there. So, all right. So question, what is house hacking? Sabina, you talked about this briefly, so.
I did mention it, yes. So I think that there's a few different ways to do it. Not the most common, but one way to do it is to buy a home minimum down, rent out the other units. It's one of those like duplex or triplex or fourplex. But I think a more common way, an easier way for most people to just kind of do it, especially if you're like buying in your 20s or 30s, or you're just a young investor, you don't have a family yet, or maybe you do. Maybe you do have a family and you just got extra rooms, and you rent out a room. That is, I think, the easiest way to do it is to just buy a house. I know a lot of people do it for their kids when they go away for college. And instead of them, paying to rent a house and their buddies are paying to rent a house, sometimes a parent will throw down and buy a house, get a mortgage on it, and then just rent it out to, their child's roommates. And so that's one way to do it. And I'm sure do you guys know anyone who rents out a room at their house?
Oh, lots of people, conversations about it. I see different podcasts out there that talk about that. Here in California, though, you just have to be careful and make sure you have a written lease agreement. It's tough to rent with friends, especially when you own the property. Make it written down, everything. Trust me, you're going to thank me later because stuff happens. And here in California, we're definitely like a pro-tenant state,
Yep.
more than a landlord state. And so you want to make sure that you're doing everything right on there. And it's challenging because the challenges to it is, they know you're the owner, and if a light bulb breaks, they're going to ask you to fix it. If it's at midnight, they're going to call you anytime. So there's pros to it because you can definitely make a pretty good amount of money to it. And you can definitely, yes, but there's cons, just like with everything else.
There's definitely a lot of risks. It's just like everything, right? You've got pros and cons. I just had one of those where there were 6 tenants in one house, and it got really interesting. It's an excellent way to cash flow, but I will say when there's discrepancies or if there are lack of leases in writing, lots of different things, and there's like a lot of risk. I think that we made a very valid point. California is not very landlord leaning, it's more tenant leaning. So as long as people evaluate the risk and reward in that, I think that it can be an excellent opportunity for people.
Absolutely.
Another thing I've seen people do is parents who have college kids purchase a rental property, like a second home, near the university that their kids attend with extra rooms, and then they rent out the extra rooms. I've seen that lately, like in the last, like 1 to 2 years.
I see that a lot too.
Yeah, because it's like the parents are willing to cover the mortgage too. If their kids are in college, they probably into an affluent, California school where tuition's not cheap. So,
and it's like you have to pay the rent anyway on like the house that they're going to rent. I mean, I think the first year you have to do a dorm or whatever, but like after that, it's you're going to blow that money anyway.
Right.
So the advanced strategy is when you're saving for college is instead of putting in a 529 plan, you get a multifamily, you rent it out. Excuse me. So you get a multifamily unit. You're having your child that's going to university, or you're renting out the multifamily units, and hopefully you're making enough income to pay for the tuition. So instead of let's just say $100,000 saved for college, how about putting that down on a multifamily and using the income from the multifamily to pay for the tuition?
For sure.
So
Great strategy. So many different ways to play it. Again, what I love about real estate, it's limitless. So many different things that you can do.
Awesome. Okay, so more questions. So can renovation costs be rolled into the loan at purchase?
Yeah, that's factored into the renovation loan. So it's usually the purchase price plus the costs, and then your down payment is based on that number.
Awesome. Okay, so we talked about the period of time. So how long do you have to stay on the property? So, what are the rules again, Sabina?
If you're buying a primary residence, you're committing to living in it for at least 1 year as your primary residence.
Awesome. Okay, Airbnb question. Can I use a loan to get an Airbnb?
Heck yes. And depending on whether you need to use rental income to offset and to help qualify for it, that's just going to depend on the loan structure we're using. But if you don't need rental income, we can always just run it as a second home, because most Airbnbs are second homes if you plan on staying there as well, right? And I think when people have an Airbnb, that's usually the route they go, is they usually get an Airbnb for a place that they like to stay in an area they like to visit a lot. So that, and then if you do, or if you're strictly buying it as an investment property and you do need the rental income to help offset it, we do have programs that allow the short-term rental income, whether Airbnb or VRBO and some of the other platforms. But we typically will calculate the income based off of what comes up under AirDNA. It's a software and system we use to see what the short-term rental income looks like in that market.
Okay.
Is there any system that you use to help listing agents or buyer's agents with rent rolls? Or is it something that you guys calculate on your own, like through your own comps and different things and so on?
The appraiser does. So we don't usually run comps. The appraiser does. And so they'll kind of pull whatever the market rents are. And actually, there was a very unique loan scenario that we had about 2 weeks ago, where it was a property in Orange County. It was a little bit needed some love, and it was going to be rented. It was going to be an investment property, and the appraiser marked it as like $3,000 a month in rent. It was like a 3-bedroom, and I'm like, I'm sorry, in Orange County, like you can't get a 3-bedroom for $3,000. Like that appraiser is wrong. And the investor was using a DSCR loan, which means that it basically needs to break even in order to qualify. We underwrite the rental income only, it's just based on a ratio. It's called the debt service coverage ratio, and it just means that the rent needs to cover the debt, and that includes property taxes, insurance, everything. And so we needed the rent to come in, I think, at like $4,200. And we kind of fought the appraiser on that. And he's like, well, in the current condition of the property, And we're like, yeah, but he's not going to rent out the current condition of the property. He's going to fix it up. It's just not realistic. Like it was currently, I think, a property with like a lot of stuff. What do you call that? Like when somebody gathers a lot of stuff. And so obviously he was going to clear all of that out and he was going to refurbish the entire place and then rent it out. And that was an argument that the underwriter and the appraiser accepted, and they increased the rental value because we were like, wait, I'm sorry, but nowhere in Orange County can you rent a 3-bedroom place for like $3,000 unless you were locked in a long time ago.
Absolutely. So yeah, you answered that question. DSCR loans. And what's the minimum and credit scores? What should people look out for if they're interested in a DSCR?
Typically, you cannot be a first-time home buyer. We have tons of investors we work with for the DSCR loans. Not a single one that I work with that we do in-house allows it to be a first-time home buyer. You have to at least own your primary residence or another investment property, but you cannot have not owned a home at some point. And so I like DSCR loans because they're super easy, right? Let's see. Sorry, just had a weird pop-up. They're super easy because we don't need to look at your tax returns. We don't need to look at all of your income and get all your pay stubs and everything. We're strictly looking on whether the property can cash flow or not. And there's different ratios we use. And so minimum FICO is usually at least 660 on these.
Awesome. Thank you.
Minimum down payment is usually 15 to 20%. There's a little bit of flexibility with the DSCR in terms of, comparing it to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. But again, it has to cash flow. So sometimes putting that 15%, 20% down, you're not going to have enough of a down payment to actually have the rent cover the full payment. And I think as an investor, like that's number one goal, right? Is to at least try to break even.
Absolutely. All right. So I have someone from LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Lots of good ideas. Oh, it's Darius. Okay. So it's my friend in London watching on LinkedIn. So thank you for watching. Achulabaye Dario. Absolutely. Okay. What else do we have as far as questions? I think we kind of covered that basis. So
this was informative as always, Sabina. I'm so grateful to have both of you in my corner and to learn from you. It's amazing.
Thanks. I love nerding out on loan stuff. So
absolutely. So any last comment, Sabina?
Yeah, actually, back to the DSCR loan. It's one of the only loan types where we can use the interest-only payment on it if they're doing an interest-only loan, which a lot of investors love. It's the only time we can actually use the interest-only payment as a qualifying payment. Awesome. So that's a good way to get that payment down a little bit to even break even on the rent in general for the investor, but also for qualifying purposes.
Got it.
That's great. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. So thank you. And we'll bring you on again, Sabina, for more, more loan stuff again. And so everyone that's watching, next week we're going to have a live stream on, talking with the home inspector on what to look for in a home inspection plan or a home inspection report. And the following week, we're going to have an auctioneer here to talk about real estate auctions. So, please come back, everybody else that's watching for that information. And so, thank you, Sabina, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
We'll see you later. Have a good one.
All right. So real estate investing doesn't have to start with 20% down. In many cases, investors start by living in the property first, using low down payment loan programs or using renovation financing to create value. I want to thank Sabina Adamski for sharing her expertise today, and my co-host, Krystle Rains. If you're thinking about buying a home or starting your real estate investment journey, feel free to reach out to any one of us three. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like to this live stream so more people can watch and learn how to build wealth through real estate. So, Conrad Mazeika, and we'll see you on the next live stream.
See ya.